Hello everyone, I've just read chapter 28, I know I keep saying that, I just read chapter 28 of Darth Plagueis. May as well just make it a catchphrase now, mightn't I? But I've just read it, and this is really setting up the movies. We're pretty much right at the start of the Phantom Menace by now. Maul's returned from his mission to get rid of the Black Sun Vigos, and Palpatine gets a bit frustrated at him for revealing the Sith's existence to their main leader. And scolds him for doing so, and tells him to go back to one of his worlds that he usually would reside on off Coruscant, and to meditate and train there. But he has his appreciation for what he did. And then I find this conversation to be really funny because it's out in public, and Plagueis and Palpatine are discussing pretty much controlling both sides, controlling the Senate into their favour. But Ego, Damask and Palpatine are in public, and they're talking about how, and Palpatine tells him that the Black Sun has pretty much been eliminated as a threat to meet resistance with them. And Plagueis is quite pleased to hear that. And Damask is highly praises Maul, saying that Palpatine trained him well, and Palpatine mentions that he revealed the Sith the existence of the Sith to the leader of them, to the leader of Black Sun, Alexei Garvin. And Damask just turns his head away and says, well, Garvin is dead, so what does it matter now? Because he did the exact same thing to Varuna as he died. And Palpatine mentions that this will probably be the last time he's permitted to appear in public without guards because of Varuna's death. He says he's going to convince Captain Panaka that he shouldn't be accompanied. And Plagueis inquires, has Queen Amidala express any concern about the presence of Trade Federation fighters? And Palpatine says that no, they're at the edge of the system waiting words from Palpatine to jump on the boot, and that Gunray had as angry as he was about the taxation legislation, he was able to convince him that by holding Naboo they can pretty much maximise their profits by taking over Naboo, and because again plasma energy is a highly profitable thing in the Star Wars galaxy, and he was able to convince Maul that by going to Naboo, Gunray, that by blockading Naboo he can pretty much ensure the maximisation of profits. And he mentions that by threatening Queen Amidala, she won't allow her people to suffer, and within a month she'll sign a treaty. And Plagueis is again quite pleased. Everything is moving forward. Valorum has pretty much had a lot of his power revoked. He can't call upon Jedi or judges or the judicial to intervene and sort out problems anymore. So through the ruining of his reputation, of it being accused that he's investing into tax just to increase his own profits. And Plagueis says, "Is it not a measure of our success that we can award worlds as if they were merely business contracts?" And it's quite important, and we find out why they're having this conversation in public. It's so that it pretty much doesn't come as a surprise that Damask is appointed co-chancellor when Palpatine becomes chancellor. And that Palpatine already has a lot of traction for becoming chancellor. And Plagueis mentions that a blockade followed by an invasion wouldn't really do the Trade Federation any favours in the terms of new allies, but it would allow them to figure out whether the droids army would be required, what things needed to be altered by the droid army. And Palpatine mentions that the carelessness of the Nemoidians of the Trade Federation they allowed their factories manufacturing the droids to be found, and Damask says, well, they have what they need for now, and that their acquisition of Naboo will show the failings of diplomacy and show how the Jedi take a violent approach to these into intervening. And he says that they will, in preparation for the war they're intending to make, the Clone Wars, they'll relocate Bactoid armour to a company, not stuff, but to Geonosis, so that they can continue the manufacturing of, I think, either weapons or droids. But he mentions that they can't quickly give their allies weapons and to secure a quick victory. They need to draw out the war to pretty much, as Plagueis puts it, pound the galaxy to a pulp, and so that they will be eager to embrace their stability. And that's why Plagueis was wanting to get the insectoid species to build weapons, because he wants to start that war. Anyway, Palpatine says that they need to still make that army for the Jedi. They need to still make the clone army for the Jedi. He doesn't mention clones, but he does say they need to still raise an army, but one that's in the end is ultimately loyal and answers to the Chancellor. And Damask mentions that if they clone an army, they can do that. And Palpatine says, but the Jedi aren't. And Palpatine just says it just sounds too simple. The Jedi aren't too accepting of surprise, and because of course they will be soldiers, which will be against what the Jedi stands for. He says it will make it even more difficult for them to accept it. And Plagueis mentions, well, maybe at the end of a long war, with victory in sight. And Palpatine mentions that to do that, they'd need to manage both sides. And it says, even if a surprise attack could be launched, not every Jedi will be in the field. And Plagueis says there is no need to really worry about that, just so long as... And says that there's no need to really worry about that, only those who are suitable for combat will need to worry them. They'll need to concern them in their activities. And Damask mentions that, well, and Palpatine mentions, well, the Kaminoans did fail him. Hold on. And while Palpatine mentions Kaminoans failed him, Plagueis makes it clear it was because he gave him the Inquiry template and said that humans might be easier to replicate and, of course, control. So, Plagueis mentions that they'll need to... Palpatine asks if he'll contact them again, and Plagueis says he will, but they'll need to persuade someone in particular. And Palpatine waited to find out who, but Plagueis seems to say who. Plagueis then goes on to say to tell the Neimoidians to launch the blockade. It's because there is a orbital facility congress coming up, where pretty much Palpatine will be able to gain more traction, and of course with that blockade he's going to have even more support. But Palpatine mentions that Monkar has pretty much gone a bit rogue on the Trade Federation, and is trying to go against what Palpatine's trying to do, just to increase his own, just to be more, just keep the economic interests of the Trade Federation going, because what Palpatine's going to do is trying to get them to do isn't going to be in the best interest. It will make them seem a bit villainous, and that's not what Monkar wants. And Plagueis really gets frustrated, saying this is what happens when beings are promoted beyond their level of competence. And Palpatine gets quite angry, thinking he's referring to him. But Plagueis says, no, not you, Gunray and Uzilk, and says that the Force... sorry about that. But Plagueis says that the Force distresses and penalises them for scheming with those too ignorant to appreciate and execute, as he puts it, their designs. But Palpatine accepts that, and Palpatine takes comfort in knowing that even Plagueis had his limits of scolding, and he says that to hold off the blockade before, and he says hold off the blockade so that's, what's his name again, Monkar can be ridded. Anyway, I think 2 weeks later, Monkar's killed, and Maul is now in possession of a holocron that he got from Monkar, and is intending to rendezvous with Palpatine in the Congress to be given the holocron. And Damask is a bit, and rightfully so, frustrated at Palpatine's decision to have him be present, just because of how bloodthirsty he was, and how people may figure out that he's on the dark side, and that he can maybe get away and scramble the minds, as he says, of when it comes down to the security law enforcement personnel. But he wouldn't be able to do that with a Jedi. He wouldn't be able to hide himself from a Jedi. And mentions that, well, maybe the Sith could be, and says that the Sith could be endangered. But Palpatine assures him that that's to arrange for assures Plagueis that he's got prestige to have Maul secretly come aboard, so that they may rendezvous and at a pre-arranged time and place, and he can pass over the holocron. And even so, Plagueis still isn't convinced, given the whole affair with Monkar had almost ended in catastrophe. and Plagueis asks why not having surrendered these. Well, not, it says crystal here. It's meant to be hologram. I just realised. No, again, I just realised. So maybe Plagueis is saying crystal. So people don't catch on. But still, Palpatine just then goes on to say holocron anyway. So, but when Plagueis asks why not just have Maul give the crystal to Prestige, Palpatine just says we don't know what data the holocron might contain, what sensitive data, and it seems to be clear that he doesn't trust Prestige with that. And Plagueis is still suspicious because he's saying just make sure Maul. I just hope you haven't told Maul to. I just hope you've told Maul to stay unseen, because a tattooed Zabrak enrobed head to toe in black would certainly stand out among the luxuriously dressed crowds there. And Palpatine, he couldn't argue with that. So anyway, we get to see how some of the people that could be elected, such as Senator Bail Antilles, and yes, it is Antilles, not Organa. They are two separate characters who was supported by Java Saboth, or Sabaev. I always say Saboth though. He was supported by Java Saboth, who, if you've read ahead to the Empire trilogy, you know he was cloned. So that got a little bit of a. Well, I haven't read the trilogy. I'm aware of. Well, I haven't even read a book of the Heir to the Empire trilogy. Aside from a bit of it, I am aware of Java Saboth being in it, and that got a bit of me excited. But I know that's a clone of him. Anyway, we're getting beside the point. Amy Team, who is the new senator of Malista, was also quite popular. And then there was also Valorum, who was ineligible for re-election because of the all recent accusations of him being more interested in increasing his own profits, and he was having to frequently defend himself against the ethics committee. But anyway, Valorum managed to make himself a bit the centre of attention by the presence of Yoda, Mace Windu and Anti-Galia. But anyway, the Trade Federation is still on the edge of the Chomel sector, which is what Mare Naboo is. And without a world that's under siege to try and generate sympathy and support for its nomination, Palpatine was pretty much just another potential nominee. But eventually, but because he has the support because he's got the company of Higo Damask, the banking clan co-chairman San Hill, and the recently appointed Senate Vice Chairman Masamida, he's got, and also Senator Ormfritar. It's still got people's support. But anyway, Palpatine goes off to try and get the holocron, and Damask goes and finds Sifo-Dyas. Who, fun fact, Sifo-Dyas was actually meant to be Sidious in the original scripts. It was meant to be Sido-Dyas, which is meant to be Sidious, but it was eventually changed to Sifo-Dyas. And makes Sifo-Dyas his own character. But anyway, Plagueis goes up to Sifo-Dyas and asks him if he can recall the conversation they had on Sereno 20 years ago. And he says no, he can't, but Plagueis mentions now more than ever he's predicting that there's going to be a war that's going to come. He doesn't say he's the one that's he's the one that's conspired it, but he mentions that he sees a war coming on, and that the Republic and the Senate and Chancellor of, and it says that the Republic and the Senate, that the Republic and Chancellor of Rome are just too far into trying to uphold the Rusan reformations or resignations or whatever they were called, and that they would need to raise, and that he would need Sifo-Dyas to raise the army in secret, and that the senators would be too invested in the senators would be too invested in the economics of the warfare that would, of the economic increase that would, of the warfare that would be coming. And he mentions that he thinks Palpatine is the one that can bring the Republic back into shape, and that if he can get, that if Sifo-Dyas prepares an army that may not end up being used for the Republic, they at least have some way to, of course, defend against the kind of rebellion that's stirring up against the Republic. With so many worlds being dissatisfied and enraged by how the Republic's treating them, and he eventually brings up the Kaminoans and how he would pay for the army that may or may not be used, but alongside some help from from associates at the banking clan and some others. But eventually he is able to get Sifo-Dyas to consider it, and he walks off. And as we know, Sifo-Dyas eventually does decide to make to commission the army. But Damask then goes back to where he was with Palpatine, and Palpatine's in possession of the holocron. And he now starts to say holocron. I guess Palpatine just made him realise, oh, we may as well blow our cover with the holocron. But as it turns out, Maul wasn't in possession of it, but instead Lorne Pavan, which I'm sure someone else knows I'm sure someone else is aware of who he is, but this was pretty much the first time I heard of him. I think he was mentioned earlier in the book, but I don't think he had any significant influence on it. And that Pavan's received some wounds from Maul, but Palpatine was instructed to give it to the Jedi. But eventually Pavan's going to die, and the Sith got what they want from that holocron, so they're happy with it. And Palpatine mentions that is Sifo-Dyas going to make the army, and Plagueis says even if he decides against it, there could still be a way for him to make the army in Sifo-Dyas' name. But he says that the Force tells him that Sifo-Dyas will eventually just do it. Do it. And if he doesn't do it, Palpatine mentions, well, now that he'll know that we're trying to raise an army for the Republic, that could put us in potential danger if he doesn't do it. And Damask agrees, but he says it won't matter because now we're at a point where we are invincible. And now Palpatine's sat with and then we cut to Palpatine being sat with Valorum, who is talking about how he was talking about the scandal against him, and how he can't figure out who is trying to do it or why, because the amount of credits that has been pretty much put into his pockets to make him seem to make him seem more self-interested. But we also get a note where it's for some reason, for pretty much the third, maybe fourth time in the book now, we've seen there's been a line where Palpatine has been intending to leap at someone and strangle them with his hands. The amount of times in this book Palpatine has wanted to do that is absolutely ridiculous. It may as well just be a meme at this point. Same with Plagueis regarding someone. The amount of times Luceno used the phrase Plagueis regarded in the early chapters, it was ridiculous. But anyway. Valorum is talking about how it's just talking about the situation, how difficult it is, but he just can't fathom how, rather than going into financial decline, he's actually going up in finance. But between the Congress and Palpatine's conversation with Valorum, we learn that Palpatine has given the order to start the blockade, and the Queen is requesting Valorum's assistance to try and rid them from the planet. And she explains that it's in protest to the taxation of the free trade routes. And Valorum is determined to try his best to get to assemble a what was it? What did he call it? A special session. He says he will convene a special session, and that he pledges Naboo his undivided attention. But Masamida is pretty much supervising everything he does, so he won't allow it unless he sees it as fit. And Palpatine manipulates Valorum into thinking, but Valorum? That's the Inquisitor, Grand Inquisitor Valorum. Valorum is Palpatine convinces Valorum that the Trade Federation is behind the scandal, and he says that, and Valorum mentions that he tries best to resolve the situation, but he can't really just send out the Jedi to intervene like he usually does. But I think we'll eventually just find a way to do it, because he sends Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan anyway. But anyway, it does warn Palpatine that he should be prepared to be pushed into the spotlight. And that's where we end off the chapter. And I, again, really enjoyed the chapter. And the thing is, we've only got 2 more chapters to go, and the epilogue, of course. And it really does feel like this is where everything's starting to take shape, because this is overlapping into the Phantom Menace. But so I do find it funny. It's only at the end of the book things are taking shape. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and goodbye.